All right. So this is about the time I give up, or at least that's how it used to be. Um, I knew this time would come again, but I had no clue how or when it would happen. When I started playing the handpan, I fell in love with it. I began playing it all of the time. It became a very big part of my life, and as time went by, my awareness moved further and further away from God and more towards this handpan. In the beginning, it was easy to keep balance, but over time, my awareness slowly drifted. It drifted more and more, towards the handpan, what I was doing with it every single day. Originally, I created an intention that I wanted to make this a way of life, a way to be able to support myself. And as the focus went more towards this goal, I started to become lost in my restless mind. Uh, I was trying to make connections and trying to determine where I needed to be rather than just being. After about 4 or 5 months of doing this, it became so much for me that, I noticed I didn't feel the same way I did when I started. I was no longer balanced. I was still focused on God, but my focus on the handpan was so strong that my meditations were not the same. My balance wasn't the same. My perception in general was skewed. At the time, my decision was to go ahead and quit everything I was doing and start all over again. Go back to square one where everything worked by eliminating all distractions, and then go back to focusing on meditation and God communion. The idea was to keep it simple and see what I learned from that experience. Um, all of this began around November of 2017, and then it ended up extending into like the middle of January this year. What I ended up learning over those months, though, was that I never lost my awareness or connection. It was simply like temporarily covered. It's kind of like one of those sunny days where you have like an hour or two where there's like nothing but clouds and everything gets really dark. If we just wait a little bit, the sun will eventually pop out again and everything becomes clear. This situation was no different. It brought about the realization that I was not going back to how I was in the past. The mere acknowledgement that I was willing to give up everything, including the things that I loved, said a lot about what I was doing, and I wasn't giving myself credit for this. Instead I was judging myself for losing awareness and focusing on the material, when in reality, choosing to discontinue was a sign of where my focus was at to begin with. So now that time has come again, only this time it's different. When I stopped playing the handpan in November to get away from the distractions, I made a decision to stop playing music in general. Along this process, I came across the Cosmic Chants book by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's a book filled with a bunch of spiritually charged chants. I started learning to play the handpan to the chants, which eventually led to singing. After doing that for about 2 months, I started to enjoy that singing aspect of it, and it started to open me up to the idea of singing more. I also realized that while I was still focused on God, I also need to focus on the physical manifestation of this experience just as well. It's one thing to be in communion with the Creator in each moment of the day, but if I'm still making decisions based on fear, I'm kind of working, in contradiction to my intentions. So the month of January and February became about releasing those fears. All the chanting, meditations, actions, everything was focused on releasing fears. And as this happened, many new attractions began to surface, like the underlying desire to sing. This attraction became stronger and stronger, and I knew without a doubt that this is where my heart was at. It was covered by so many layers of fear, not being able to do it, or what other people thought of my voice, or what other people thought of what I had to say. And most important, my fear of being able to follow my heart over whatever the mind was attracting. These fears were never about what others thought of me. It's what I thought about myself. I perceive reality from that perspective. My assumption growing up, therefore, was that others were thinking of me the same way. So this release of fears over that month brought up a really strong feeling of faith, courage, confidence, and just a state of being that I've never felt before in this lifetime. I knew that I could accomplish whatever I wanted to, but I was afraid that this confidence would also pull me away from my awareness of God. So immediately, as soon as I started to think that, the memory started to come back of what happened back in November and December. It was the realization that I was not going back to how I used to be. God is already a huge part of this life, and in every single moment, it's like, it's not going to disappear. It's not going anywhere. It was only my remembrance of an experience without God that created the fearful feeling of living that way again. However, that was only possible during a time of doubt. That doubt no longer exists. Now, we're back here to where we were from a perspective of feeling where I was back in November. These past couple of months have been pretty hardcore about singing. I know that this is where I'm going, and I know that there's nothing that's going to stop me. Music has been a very large part of my life, and so has fear. I work for a bank right now out of fear because I loved music so much that I accumulated $250,000 in student loan debt in order to pursue a life as a recording engineer. I did it for about a year and a half, but then ran away from that in 2009 when I was faced with a divorce and a $2,000 a month student loan payment. I gave up on following my dreams in order to save my marriage and to find some other ways to pay off this debt. So I went back to doing the only other thing I knew how to do, work with computers. I always thought that I loved computers, but it's pretty obvious now, and I realized that I only got into it because it was what my father loved. I wanted so much to find a way to connect with my father that I took on his hobby as my own. I lived his life as my own. I was into hooking up sports cars and working on computers. That was my dad's life growing up. So growing up, I was always torn between my love for music and my desire for approval from my family. On one hand, I knew they wanted to support me, but at the same time, I also knew that they were, or at least now, that they were just reflecting their own fears and trying to coach me to make safe decisions. So I grew up with work to support myself and hobbies to help me feel happy when I wasn't at work. And I know that a lot of people can relate to this experience. It's what most of us are doing right now. If everyone was doing what they love to do, how much more success would we have in this world? We look at success as being a top tier percentage, which is honestly really just those people who had a dream and wouldn't take no for an answer. The rest of us decided to pick the option that worked for us and kept our dreaming limited, or at least to a perspective of wishes or what ifs, right? I will not do this any longer. I won't. I will not. My pie in the sky goals are there to show me what is possible and also to show me how limited my perception is. In regards to spiritual goals like Christ consciousness, cosmic awareness, full realization, I see the possibilities of an awareness far beyond what this little self thinks it is. It also shows my limitations by showing the belief that I am not already this. At the same time, it also shows the extended possibilities of concepts and comprehensions that can only be understood when these goals are manifest as reality in every moment. The same applies to the goals of the mind and physicality. The last time this situation occurred, I ran away from it out of fear, thinking that I was moving away from God. This time I realized that I'm not going anywhere. I'm looking in one direction and simply just need to choose to turn my head. Rather than completely turning around and only focusing on God, I choose to respond differently. I acknowledge how I feel. I am grateful for the challenges. I am grateful for the I am grateful for the restless mind. I'm grateful for all those things that I can feel and experience right now that I wasn't aware of when I was a hermit. It shows me that I'm going through change, both internally as well as externally. It shows that I'm being presented opportunities I was afraid of in the past. It shows that I'm receiving everything I asked for. Let me show you something real quick. So here's something that I wrote back in January, February, when I decided that I was no longer going to live in fear anymore. There are no limits. God will only give me what I can handle. I am the determining factor. I will push myself as hard as I can. I will surpass all limitations. I will push myself to the breaking point and learn to work through it in the process. I can only move as fast as I choose. Comfort and discomfort are my determining factors. I will learn to detach from the ideas of comfort. And here's a little icing on the cake. Amazing things are manifesting right now. If I feel contrary, I am just feeling the old that was replaced. Or I am feeling the old that was just replaced. So now, I move forward. I acknowledge how I feel. I acknowledge why I feel the way that I do, and I choose to continue moving forward. I am my own limitations, and I choose to release them all. Make manifest everything I need to speed up my growth and awareness. If I feel it's too much, I will recognize that this is my perception that sees this. In these moments, I will ask to be shown another perspective, to see the situation from a perspective that is more beneficial and less destructive. 2 months ago, I started posting these signs all over the condo to remind myself to stay in the present moment. Okay? Hong Sao, it's a technique that teaches awareness on breath. Eventually I would like to discuss this, but for now it's not relevant to that point. But ultimately, I post these signs all around the condo so I can constantly remind myself. However, over this past month, I've gone astray in this process. So now I will continue to focus on it in every moment that continues moving forward. There will be no retreating from the world. There will be no decisions to stop anything. And instead, unlike the past, I will continue to move forward. I will move forward and focus more on the awareness in the process. You know, this feels like uncharted territory right now, at least for this experience, this lifetime. But I feel the progress. You know, things feel different now. And then, as all of this was manifesting today, this commercial came into awareness. Watch this.
So I just did what I consider to be one of the most difficult things to do in my profession of acting, which is to walk as yourself.
This is the first time in my life I have ever actually talked about my work in this way. I didn't go to drama school. The first time, in fact, I remember seeing drama at all was when my mother took me to an amateur production of Hamlet. It was a cataclysmic experience. A darkened space with a group of people watching something, and they are transformed by it. I would like to share some of the ways I work. Never act in front of a mirror. You are doing the exact opposite of what acting is about. Acting is all about what's happening within you. It doesn't matter what's happening on your face. It's a collaboration between us all. Your costume designer is incredibly important in building your character. A Russian with a bad wig and these glasses, nomination. Likewise, the environment is going to tell the story of the character as much as the costume is. I knew nothing at all about working in front of a camera. Now, this is what happens just before you do a take. At this point, you have to cut all this stuff out. Action. And when the director calls action, you don't have to start acting straight away. Of course, the beautiful moment is between you and that little spot next to the lens. I remember this feeling so well, and many of you will feel it, when suddenly you're in control of it. I felt I was on this incredibly powerful horse, but I had the vocal ability, I had the intellectual ability for that all to settle, and now I could play with it. The moment where your technique is so deep within you, that gives you the freedom then to invent, to improvise, to act.
So really listen and pay attention to what was just said here. Our role as the actor in this play is about projecting what's within. Focus less on the expression and more on the being. The expression will naturally happen. At first, we got to find balance. That is the most important thing. But then after we learn how to maintain balance, we master it. And after we master it, as Helen mentions, when suddenly you're in control of it. I felt like I was on this incredible, powerful force. But I had the vocal ability and I had the intellectual ability for that all to settle. And now I could play with it. The moment when your technique is so deep within you that it gives you this freedom to improvise, to act.